Hey everyone, welcome back. We're tackling a really important topic today, specifically for those of you working with trauma survivors.
Yeah, this should be a good one.
We're going to be diving deep into self-care
Okay.
and not just, your typical take a bubble bath
Oh,
self-care.
right.
We're really going to explore how professionals in this field can thrive
Mm-hmm.
while navigating all the emotional weight that comes with this work.
For sure.
To guide our deep dive today, we've got a couple of interesting sources.
Okay.
One is an article that focuses on workplace wellness in general.
Got it.
And then we're also going to be looking at some insights from Trauma-Informed Oregon.
Okay, yeah, their stuff is always really interesting.
Yeah, especially their section on trauma-informed workforce wellness strategies.
Yeah, that's a really great resource.
So to kick things off, the first article we're looking at uses this really interesting analogy about workplace wellness.
Oh, okay. I'm curious.
It says that workplace wellness functions like gears in a machine.
I like that. That's a good way to think about it because it really highlights how interconnected everything is.
Right.
If one gear is off or broken, the whole system suffers.
Absolutely.
Everything just kind of falls apart.
And this article really emphasizes that it's not just about individual employees taking care of themselves.
Right.
It's about the overall company culture.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a culture that genuinely prioritizes well-being.
100%.
In fact, they cite a study that found that 83% of employees
Wow.
are more satisfied with wellness programs
Okay.
when their leaders actively participate.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's not enough to just talk the talk.
Right. You got to walk the walk.
Exactly.
Like if your leadership team is modeling self-care and prioritizing their own well-being, it sends a really powerful message to the rest of the organization.
Totally.
It's like they're saying, hey, this is important.
Right, like we actually care about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Now let's bring in the trauma-informed perspective. Trauma-Informed Oregon makes this really clear point.
Mm-hmm.
You can't effectively care for others if you're not taking care of yourself.
That's so true.
And they call this workforce wellness.
Okay.
And they actually view it as a core component of their approach to trauma-informed care, or TIC.
I see.
So it's not just an add-on.
Right. It's foundational.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that the people working with trauma survivors are also impacted by the trauma they encounter.
Right.
Not directly, of course, but it's what we call secondary trauma or vicarious trauma.
So that how do organizations address something as complex as secondary trauma?
Well, Trauma-Informed Oregon points to Sam HSA's 4 R's of trauma-informed care as a framework.
Okay, so what are the 4 R's?
They are realize, recognize, respond, and resist re-traumatization.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Sure.
How do these 4 R's apply to not just the clients, but to the workforce too?
Okay, so realize means understanding how common trauma is and how it can impact everyone in the system.
Right, not just the clients.
Exactly, including the staff.
Okay, got it. That recognize means being able to identify the signs of how trauma is affecting individuals in the workforce.
So things like burnout,
Yeah, exactly.
compassion fatigue, maybe even increased absenteeism or difficulty concentrating.
Exactly. All of those can be signs.
Okay, that makes sense.
So then you have respond.
Right. So how does an organization respond to those signs of secondary trauma in a way that's actually helpful?
That's where things like supportive supervision come in and access to mental health resources.
Okay.
Creating a culture of open communication is also huge.
It's about having systems in place to help people who are struggling.
Yeah, and making sure they know that it's okay to ask for help.
And finally, resist re-traumatization.
Yes, this one is so important.
What does that look like in the workplace?
It's about policies and procedures that minimize the possibility of re-traumatizing clients and staff.
Interesting.
So things like trauma-informed training for all employees,
Okay.
establishing clear boundaries
Having protocols for handling crisis situations safely.
to minimize further harm.
Exactly.
So essentially creating a safe and supportive work environment for everybody.
Right.
And Trauma-Informed Oregon really emphasizes that this workforce wellness piece, it's not just a nice extra.
No, it's not essential.
It's essential for providing good care to clients.
I'm starting to see how all these gears really do connect.
Right. It's all part of the same machine.
Exactly.
If organizations are serious about providing trauma-informed care, then they really need to invest in the well-being of their workforce.
And Trauma-Informed Oregon actually gives some pretty specific ideas about what this looks like.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
On an organizational level,
Okay.
they talk about prioritizing not just physical and emotional wellness,
Yeah.
but also social and what they call professional wellness.
Professional wellness.
Yeah, what do you think they mean by that?
That's interesting.
Do you think it's like getting a promotion?
I don't think so.
I think it's more about feeling competent and valued in your role.
Okay.
Especially in a field as demanding as this one.
Right, working with trauma survivors.
Feeling good about your work can really help protect against burnout and secondary trauma.
So it's not about perks or promotion.
Right.
It's about feeling like you're making a difference.
Yes.
And feeling supported.
And feeling like your skills are being utilized.
And appreciated.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is where Trauma-Informed Oregon really hits on something crucial.
Okay, what's that?
They talk about centering workforce, equity, inclusion, and access.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
In all of these efforts.
That's so important.
They're basically saying that these wellness resources need to be available to everyone.
Yeah, regardless of background, identity, or position.
And that makes a lot of sense because those who've experienced marginalization
Right.
might have even more challenges in accessing support.
Exactly. And systemic inequities can make the impact of trauma even worse.
It's about recognizing that everyone deserves to feel safe and supported at work.
100%.
And that we need to be intentional about making sure that happens.
And it's not just a top-down approach.
Okay.
Trauma-Informed Oregon really emphasizes incorporating feedback from the workforce itself.
I like that.
Because those are the people doing the work.
Right. They're the ones on the front lines.
Exactly. They have the lived experience.
So how do they suggest getting that feedback?
Well, they talk about keeping a pulse on well-being, not just through like formal surveys and metrics,
Okay.
but through actual conversations with staff.
Real dialogue.
Yeah, and active listening.
So it's really about a culture of collaboration
It is.
where everyone feels comfortable speaking up about their needs.
And contributing to solutions.
Love that.
And here's where Trauma-Informed Oregon goes a step further.
Okay.
They don't just focus on managing the negative impacts.
Right.
They also talk about uplifting the positive.
Oh, interesting.
They want to support the resilience and strength factors of the workforce, too.
So it's not just about mitigating harm. It's also about celebrating the strengths
Exactly.
of the people doing this work.
Yes.
I love that because the people who work with trauma survivors, they're some of the most compassionate, empathetic, and resilient people out there.
They have to be.
Yeah, they have to be to do this work day in and day out.
And focusing on those strengths can help create a more supportive and empowering environment.
So instead of just focusing on burnout or secondary trauma,
All right?
we're looking at the whole picture.
Yes, the challenges and the strengths.
It's important to note, though,
Yeah.
that Trauma-Informed Oregon is very clear about one thing.
What's that?
These recommendations and resources they're providing, they're not meant to be therapy.
That's an important distinction.
So this stuff is important,
Yeah.
but it's not a replacement for individual mental health care.
Right. If someone's really struggling, they need professional help.
These resources are more about overall well-being,
Yes. Promoting resilience.
not a replacement for actual therapy.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
We've talked about workplace wellness in general and the specific challenges faced by professionals working with trauma survivors.
Like secondary and vicarious trauma.
Right.
And we touched on some key principles of a trauma-informed approach.
And one thing's become crystal clear.
What's that?
Caring for this workforce is not a luxury.
It's essential.
Absolutely crucial for both the well-being of the individuals and for the quality of care that they're able to provide. Makes you wonder if an organization says they value trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
How are they actually putting these ideas into practice?
Right. Like, what are their policies?
What resources do they have available?
Are they getting feedback from their workforce?
These are all such important questions.
They are.
I think the big takeaway here is that supporting the workforce
Yeah.
is not separate from providing quality care.
It's all connected.
It's an integral part of it. So we've laid some important groundwork here. And coming up next, we'll be diving deeper into specific strategies and resources for cultivating well-being
Sounds good.
for those working with trauma survivors. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone.
So we've been talking about the importance of a trauma-informed workplace.
Right. And how that impacts the well-being of the folks working directly with trauma survivors.
Exactly. We talked about why it's so important.
For the professionals themselves and for the quality of care they're able to provide.
But now I'm curious about the how.
The how.
Like, what can organizations and individuals actually do to promote this kind of well-being?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, right?
It is, because it's one thing to say, okay, we need to do this, but it's another to actually put it into practice.
Well, that's where Trauma-Informed Oregon gets really practical.
Oh, good.
Their website is seriously a goldmine
Oh,
of logs and resources
Proud.
specifically geared towards creating a trauma-informed workplace culture.
So they've got like actual tools and strategies.
They do.
I noticed they have one titled The True Model, a starting point for building a trauma-informed organizational workplace culture.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Have you had a chance to look at that model?
I have.
Okay.
And it's very thorough.
Like what kind of things does it cover?
It goes beyond just like individual self-care tips.
Right.
It actually dives into systemic changes that organizations can make.
Interesting.
Things like leadership styles, organizational communication,
Okay.
creating policies that support a trauma-informed approach at every level.
So it's about really embedding it into the organization.
Yes, exactly.
I see what you mean by thorough.
It's not just like a surface level thing.
Right.
It's about real change.
It sounds like they're trying to address that resist re-traumatization piece we talked about,
They are.
but on an organizational level.
Yeah, baking it into the very fabric of how they do things.
I love that.
They also have a whole bunch of vlogs for leaders,
Okay.
which I think is really smart because change often has to start at the top. One that I thought was really interesting was 7 ways for leaders to spark happiness at work in ourselves and our team.
Oh, that's a great title.
Right.
It reminds me of something we talked about earlier,
What's that?
that leaders' well-being really impacts the entire workplace.
It's true.
If they're burned out and stressed, everyone feels it.
And it trickles down.
Total.
But on the flip side, if leaders are prioritizing their own well-being and actively promoting happiness at work, it creates a much more positive and supportive environment for everyone.
Right, it's all connected.
It is.
That's actually very aligned with the gears in a machine analogy.
Right, it's all part of the same system.
It's not just about individual self-care tips.
Although those are important.
Of course.
But it's about creating an organizational culture that supports those individual efforts.
Right, a culture where self-care is valued.
Exactly.
I see they also have a vlog called Moving Workforce Wellness into Organizational Culture.
I saw that one too.
I'm really curious about their specific strategies.
Well, one of the things they emphasize is open communication and feedback.
Oh, that's so important.
They suggest checking in with staff regularly about their well-being.
Not just through like formal surveys or anything.
No more like informal conversations, creating opportunities for open dialogue.
So it's about creating a space where people feel comfortable
Sharing their struggles and their needs.
and even their ideas for improvement.
Exactly.
I like that.
They also talk about providing professional development opportunities that address the challenges of working with trauma survivors.
That makes a lot of sense.
So things like training on vicarious trauma,
Okay.
self-care strategies, building resilience.
Right. Giving people the tools they need
Exactly.
to actually navigate this work.
They also highlight peer support,
Oh, that's huge.
creating opportunities for staff to connect with each other.
Yeah, to process their experiences together.
With people who understand what they're going through.
That feeling of shared understanding is so powerful. It makes you feel less alone.
Less like you're carrying the weight by yourself.
Exactly.
And those connections can also be a great way to learn from each other.
Right. Sharing coping strategies.
Celebrating successes together.
It's about building a network of support.
Yes, both personally and professionally.
So finding your people is key.
It really is.
But what about those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed in the middle of the workday?
Yeah, those happen.
What are some things you can do to like regulate your emotions and get grounded?
Honestly, sometimes the simplest things are the most effective.
Okay, like what?
Taking a few deep breaths,
Okay, yeah.
focusing on your senses, stepping away from your desk for a few minutes to stretch or get some fresh air.
Those little things can really make a difference.
They can.
I'm a big believer in the power of a walk.
Oh, me too.
Just getting outside and moving my body.
Yeah,
It really helps clear my head.
it's like hitting the reset button. I think those are great examples of what trauma-informed organ calls uplifting and supporting the resilience and strength factors of the workforce.
Right. It's about remembering that even when things are tough,
Yeah,
there's still good stuff there.
there's still light.
It's about tapping into those internal resources.
The strength, the compassion, the resilience.
The things that drew us to this work in the first place.
Exactly.
It's a continual process, though, right?
It is.
Self-care isn't a one-time fix.
It's a daily practice.
It's about making that choice,
to prioritize your well-being,
even when it's hard.
even when you don't feel like it.
And remembering that taking care of yourself isn't selfish.
It's not. It's essential.
For you and for the people you serve.
It's about showing up as your best self,
Bringing your whole heart to the work.
knowing you're not alone.
So they have a section on their website called Considerations for a trauma-informed response for work settings.
Oh, wow. So they get even more specific.
They do.
What kind of stuff do they cover there? It seems like they offer guidance on handling specific situations.
Okay.
Like if a staff member is experiencing vicarious trauma.
Oh, that's so helpful.
Or if there's a crisis event that could trigger secondary trauma.
Providing those tools.
Yes, giving people a roadmap.
And they even have resources for supporting healthcare professionals and childcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's great.
Because trauma isn't limited to specific professions.
No, it's everywhere.
Especially during times of crisis.
Exactly.
And we've all been through a lot these past few years.
It's true.
It's a good reminder that we're all human.
We all have limits.
And we all need support.
Especially when things get tough.
Creating a culture of care is beneficial for everyone.
Not just those working directly with trauma survivors.
Because we're all interconnected.
And supporting each other's well-being is so important.
It makes me think back to those gears in a machine again.
Everything's connected.
When one part is struggling, the whole system is impacted.
Exactly. So let's shift gears a bit now and talk about what individuals can do to prioritize their own well-being.
I like that.
While navigating this work.
So we've talked a lot about organizations and, creating that supportive culture.
Yeah.
Which is so important.
It really is.
But now I'm kind of thinking about the individual.
Okay.
What can someone who works directly with trauma survivors do on a daily basis to take care of themselves?
Right.
Because this work can be really, really heavy.
Oh, absolutely. It can be incredibly draining.
Yeah. So where do you even begin?
Well, I think having a personalized self-care plan is crucial.
A personalized plan.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right. Everyone's different.
Exactly. You got to figure out what genuinely works for you.
That helps you de-stress.
What fills your cup.
Exactly.
But when you're surrounded by all these stories of trauma and suffering every day, it can be hard to even know where to start.
Right. Like you're just trying to survive.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's important to go back to basics.
Okay, what do you mean?
Things like setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Boundaries are huge.
Making time for activities you enjoy.
Okay.
Prioritizing sleep.
Please sleep. Yeah.
Healthy habits.
Those things can feel like luxuries sometimes.
I know.
But in this line of work, they're really necessities.
They are.
Yeah, because if you're not taking care of yourself,
right,
you can't effectively take care of others.
It's like they say you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right, exactly. And it's not sustainable in the long run.
You'll burn out.
Exactly.
And we talked about resist re-traumatization for organizations.
Right.
But that applies to individuals, too.
Oh, yeah, good point.
You have to protect yourself.
From secondary trauma.
Yes, you got to avoid getting pulled into that cycle.
So boundaries.
Boundaries are essential.
But how do you actually set those boundaries?
Yeah, in a field where the needs feel so urgent.
It can be tough.
It can.
Because you want to help.
Of course.
But you can't help everyone.
And that's the thing you have to remember. You are not responsible for fixing everyone's problems.
Right.
You can be compassionate and supportive without taking on the weight of the world.
And sometimes that means saying no.
It does.
Even when it's hard.
Even when you feel guilty.
Yeah. I struggle with that one.
It's not selfish, though.
Okay.
It's self-preservation.
Okay. I like that.
Think of it like that airplane analogy.
Oops.
You got to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Before you can help anyone else.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And speaking of analogies,
Okay.
Trauma-Informed Oregon talks about the buffering power of story.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I find that concept so fascinating because stories really do have this power to connect us.
Yeah.
To help us process difficult things.
To make meaning out of what we've been through.
Exactly. And in this line of work,
right,
sharing our stories can be really healing.
Both the hard ones and the ones that highlight resilience.
Yes, because it allows you to step back and realize you're not alone.
You're not the only one who's been through something like this.
Exactly. And that connection is so important.
Yeah. It makes you feel less isolated.
Trauma-Informed Oregon talks a lot about community.
Okay.
And I think that means finding your people.
Your tribe.
The people who get it.
The people who understand.
Yeah, your colleagues, your friends, your family, a support group.
Having those people is so crucial.
Because they can help you carry the weight.
Yeah, you don't have to do it alone.
And you can learn from each other.
Right.
Share coping strategies, celebrate successes.
It's like a network of support.
It is.
So what about in those moments when you're just feeling totally overwhelmed at work?
Yeah, those happen.
Like, what can you do right then and there?
Sometimes the simplest things are the best.
Okay, like what?
Take a few deep breaths.
Okay, deep breaths, yeah.
Focus on your senses.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe step away from your desk for a minute.
Get some fresh air.
Yeah, just a little reset.
I love that.
It can make a big difference.
Yeah, those little things can really help.
They can shift your whole state of mind.
And I think those are good examples of what trauma-informed Oregon calls uplifting and supporting the resilience and strength factors of the workforce.
Right. It's about remembering that even when things are dark,
Yeah.
there's still light.
There's still good in the world.
And there's strength within you.
It's about tapping into that.
Your own resilience, your
Right.
compassion.
Things that made you want to do this work in the first place.
And it's a journey.
It is.
Self-care isn't a destination.
Right. It's not a one-time thing.
It's a practice.
It's something you have to keep working at.
Yeah, making that conscious choice to prioritize your well-being.
Even when it's hard.
Even when there are a million other things demanding your attention.
Because it's not selfish.
No, it's not.
It's essential.
For you and for the people you're helping.
It's about showing up as your best self.
Bringing your whole heart to this work.
And knowing that you're not alone.
We're all in this together.
This has been such a great conversation.
It has.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into self-care for professionals working with trauma survivors.
And thank you to all of you out there doing this incredibly important work.
You are making a difference.
Please take care of yourselves.